Cyril Ramaphosa has informed Parliament that the cost of the deployment of 25,000 South African National Defence Force members is 615.6 million rand. The SANDF personnel have been deployed to areas affected by the recent unrest and the mass looting in the country. The unrests were centred in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng. The parliamentary notification is a legal obligation on the head of state when he deploys SANDF to a mission. The President's notification was published in Parliament's internal publication on Thursday night. It says the SANDF members will be deployed alongside the South African Police Service to prevent and combat crime and maintain law and order. The deployment will be for a duration of a month from the 12th of July to the 12th of August. President Ramaphosa has described the violent protests as a failed insurrection. Via Zoom to talk about this is the head of Africa Futures and Innovations at the Institute for Security Studies, Jakkie. Mr. Cilliers, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Thank you very much and for the invitation.
Now, the argument that why the SANDF personnel were deployed after the fact, well, is a discussion for another day. But just looking at the number of the army personnel on the streets, could it be an indication or an indictment on the SANDF and or the SAPS and the national intelligence that they failed to discharge their responsibilities to provide security for the country's citizenry?
Well, I think there's no doubt that we have seen quite a serious failure of intelligence and then quite slow reaction initially from the security cluster. But then once the government realized the scale of the problem, they reacted relatively quickly. But given the state of the South African National Defence Force, it has very limited capacity to bear, that it can bring to bear. And it, as you know, acts in support of the South African police. And there are many problems within our intelligence service, within the police, within the military, and within coordination amongst the security cluster. So we really need to hopefully take some lessons from what has happened last week, to pay some attention to what is happening in the security cluster so that we are not caught again in this situation. And I think the challenge is that we are going to see probably ongoing instability in South Africa, given poor growth and high levels of inequality and poverty. So we need to pay some attention to what's happening in the security cluster.
Yeah, you just said that, we need to take lessons and draw lessons from this particular incident. And I suppose that the security cluster is very key in drawing those lessons. That includes the South African Police Services, the South African National Defence and the State Security Agency. So what are some of these lessons that these three key units of the country's security need to learn?
Well, let's start with the security cluster is a kind of a pipeline, a chain. So let's start at the beginning of that pipeline, which is intelligence. And the Mufamadi recommendations from Dr. Sidney Mufamadi that finished his report in December of 2018 are absolutely damning. And if you then listen to that report and you listen to the evidence that was given in front of the Zondo Commission, it's difficult to see that the intelligence service is that you can do anything but entirely reconstitute it. The challenges are huge in the intelligence community, and it's no wonder that other departments are not taking the reports of the intelligence state security agency seriously. They're even disputing that they got the reports. We are caught with in Mozambique in a quite embarrassing situation, and we know that the intelligence agencies have been instrumentalized in the factional battle within the ANC, which of course is at the root of this problem. So intelligence, huge problem. The police have had a budget, almost a 2/3 increase in their budget over the last 2 decades, yet the violence caught them by surprise. And I want to repeat a point I've made previously in interviews, and that is that basic crime analysis, not even intelligence, would indicate that 75% of the violence that we saw was violence that reoccurred in places that are known to be violent. Violence like it reoccurs. So there are massive problems in the police that are overstaffed, top-heavy. We should be decentralizing the police to provincial and metros. And we should close down efforts of, for example, trying to establish a border management agency and this kind of stuff. And many other things we can talk about, the size of the VIP protection unit, the importance of focusing on detective services and re-establishing the forensic capacity within police and so on and so forth. And then in the case of the Department of Defense, which is in an absolute critical state of neglect, we're spending, I think, 0.86% of our budget on defense. Defense is completely orientated. We should focus our Department of Defense on the real challenges at hand. And those challenges are supporting our neighbors in making peace in the region, peacekeeping. It should be helping on border security and support to the police. And we should train and equip the military, because at the moment what is happening is that the military can be deployed and then they stand there. They are not equipped, nor are they enabled to be of any real use. So you see looting happening, and the poor defense people are standing there. They can do literally nothing about this. So every one of the departments, and we haven't even spoken about correctional services, has a problem. With regard to Home Affairs, well, it's seen as part of the security cluster, which is entirely wrong.
And speaking of which, Mr. Cilliers, I mean, they've got no training in community policing, and so many people have traditionally held this view that soldiers shoot first and then ask questions later. And considering that soldiers have no powers to arrest, as it were, and they lack the ability to intervene against looting and lockdown restriction violations, what exactly is their role then?
They can only provide, as has happened in this instance, they take over some responsibilities like protection of key points, and they provide backup manpower so that the police can carry on with their job. But they are effectively toothless when it really comes to combating the violence. So the argument, the main lesson that we should learn is we should start equipping and training the military to be able to play a meaningful role in this. Yeah. And that is not a policing role, but when our National Defence Force should be our source, that our emergency response force. And we use it for that the whole time. We use it to try and clean out water in the Vaal River. And when COVID happens, we call on the military the whole time. Yeah. But we're not equipping them and training them for those duties. We're training them for conventional defense, which is ridiculous.
And with the lack of training, what is the danger then of these soldiers overstepping their mandate and applying brutal and sometimes arbitrary force on citizens? And the case of the brutal murder of Collins Khosa, a resident of Alexandra, who was allegedly beaten to death by soldiers during lockdown level 5, comes to mind. I mean, where do the soldiers draw the line in intervening when life is endangered?
Well, that's exactly the point. They should be trained and equipped for those duties, because they are going to be doing those duties for years to come. They are not trained and equipped for it at the moment. The only thing they can do, they are trained for military duties. They only have sharp point ammunition. We should stop pretending that is their role. Train and equip them to be of use in these kind of situations. We are going to be faced with these situations going forward. And I'm not saying that the military does policing, but they should have options that they can really help the police service. And we're living at the moment, our military in particular is completely wrongly orientated. It is underfunded. It is in a state of acute crisis.
And we've seen soldiers barging into people's homes, Mr. Cilliers, to recover the looted goods. So yes. Is there perhaps a justification for the manner they conduct these raids? Doesn't it amount to invasion of privacy?
Yes, I think it does. But I say again, the soldiers are not trained for this. We take them, they're training to attack an enemy and destroy an enemy, and then a crisis happens and we call them up and we say, please go and go into townships or go into homes and try and recover equipment. They are used to using force. So I go back to the point, we should be equipping our soldiers for these kind of duties and not try and use them for something that exposes them to abuse and exposes our ordinary citizens to abuse. It's not fair on the military and it's not fair on the ordinary citizens.
So in short, they shouldn't be, mandated to be conducting these raids. It's only the ambit of the South African Police Service.
Yes, they act in support of the police, so they can only act if there is a policeman or woman present. That basically they act under his or her instruction. But at the moment, this is really I'm not proposing that the law in that sense be changed. But if you don't train them and equip them to be able of use to the police, then don't be surprised when there are few police and there's only military around that they abuse their mandate and don't know how to operate, or not trained, and use what they are used to. They are used to employing force to kill or maim an enemy. We have to say, guys, let's train at least portions of you, not only for this kind of role, but also for border security, for counterinsurgency. These are the challenges that we are going to be facing, not notions of defense against some type of a conventional attack, which, we've got a limited budget. We've got what we have to do is use that budget to train our security agencies for the real tasks at hand, the things that are going to challenge us going forward.
And President Ramaphosa announced a budget of over 600 million rand for the army deployment. Would you say this is necessary expenditure?
Well, the Department of Defence's budget over the years has been cut to the bone. It is quite pathetic to listen in Parliament and listen to the Minister just saying the department is in a state of crisis. And the issue here is political. And that is that President Ramaphosa, since coming into power, has placed a lot of emphasis on economic reform, dealing with corruption. He has not really paid attention to the security cluster. And the events last week, I think, is an important wake-up call that requires attention. Former President Zuma gave it lots of attention, but of course the intent there was to make sure that he wasn't prosecuted, so undermining of the judiciary and the NPA, and placing and using the intelligence services, as we heard at the Zondo Commission, for the factional battles within the ANC. And we really need to professionalize these agencies, intelligence in particular, and depoliticize them and get the factional battle of the ANC out of these agencies and prepare them for the real tasks at hand. This is not the first or the last time that we are going to be calling upon the SANDF to come and help the police. And we must train and equip them to be able to do this in a way that will not endanger ordinary citizens.
And seeing that the situation is relatively calm, both in KwaZulu-Natal and in Gauteng, so is there a need of keeping these soldiers on the streets?
I think for a time being, I mean, you mentioned at the start of this that I think it's authorized till the 6th of August, which is not long into the future. And they'll probably stay there for that period. And I think that's important to bring stability and to make it clear that this attempted violent insurrection that we've seen, which got completely out of hand, that people accept that there's a degree of calm and stability restored in the country. And then, of course, what needs to happen is we need to bring the perpetrators that started organizing this thing to book and to prosecute them. How that's going to happen, given the state of the security clusters abroad, is entirely a different issue.
All right, Jakkie Cilliers, Head of Africa Futures and Innovations at the Institute for Security Studies, joining us live via Zoom. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.